A glittering photo of my living room online. A phone call ringing in the middle of the night after 2 years of silence. The next morning, they landed in my city, bringing warm smiles and a cold number. $39,000. They said it was for the family. I looked at my condo keys on the table and understood. This time, I set the rules. My name is Tessa Whitlow, and I'm 28 years old. The sound of a family Sunday lunch in Bridgeton, Minnesota, is not a gentle murmur. It is a collision of scraping forks, the high-pitched shriek of my nephew Tommy, and, overriding all of it, the tinny, relentless cheer of my cousin Sadie's voice broadcasting from 3 separate phones propped up on the dining table. And this one, you guys, this one is just so versatile. Sadie's digital voice chirped, echoing in triplicate. You can wear it with jeans. You can wear it to a wedding, seriously. It's only $24.99 and the code is Sadie Sparkle. A digital cha-ching sound erupted from my mother's phone. She got another one, Mom announced, beaming at the screen as if Sadie had just cured a disease. That's my girl, my uncle muttered, his mouth full of the roast I had spent 4 hours preparing. I cleared my throat. The sound was immediately swallowed by a debate over whether Sadie should offer free shipping. I waited, a small, genuine smile fixed on my face, my hands clasped in my lap. The news felt like a warm stone in my chest, something I'd been holding on to, waiting for the right moment to share. There was never a right moment. There was only the noise, and the waiting, and the eventual realization that the moment would have to be torn, jaggedly, from the fabric of whatever else was happening. So, I actually have some really great news, I said, pitching my voice just above the live stream. Nobody looked up, not my father, who was staring at the game on the television mounted in the corner, not my mother, who was typing furiously into Sadie's comment feed, not Sadie's parents, who were tracking her sales on an iPad. I got the promotion, I said, louder this time. My father grunted, his eyes fixed on a replay. This roast is fantastic. Someone really outdid themselves. Someone? I was sitting 3 feet away from him. I had basted it every 30 minutes. Thanks, Dad. I made it. But did you hear what I said? I got the promotion at work. Oh, that's nice, honey, Mom said, her thumb tapping fire emoji, fire emoji, fire emoji. Sadie, tell them about the matching earrings. They're hypoallergenic, Sadie's voice shrieked from the phones. Another cha-ching. I watched them. The moment deflated, the warm stone in my chest cooling to a familiar, heavy pebble. I had been working toward this for 3 years. Late nights, endless validation protocols, metrics that I had not just met but shattered. Senior device specialist. It was a significant step, a title that came with a team and a salary that would finally truly make me independent. And it had evaporated, unheard, over a plate of cooling potatoes. My gaze fell to the table. It was a landscape of destruction. Greasy plates, crumpled napkins, a sticky puddle of spilled juice. Without a word, I stood up. My hands began the familiar, automatic work. I gathered my father's plate, stacking my uncle's on top of it. The weight of the ceramic was solid in my hands. Tessa, honey, while you're up, my mother said, her eyes finally lifting from the screen, not to look at me, but to gesture at my nephew, Tommy, who was mashing gravy into the tablecloth. Can you cut up his meat? You know how he likes it, just tiny. The old reflex, the one trained by 28 years of being the designated helper, almost made me nod, almost made me say, of course. I was the one who did the chores. I was the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, who set up their new phones, who listened to the long circular complaints about neighbors. I was the person they needed. But I was not. I realized the person they saw. I put the stack of plates down. The sound of the heavy porcelain hitting the table was sharp, sudden. It was the first thing that made anyone look. Even my father's head swiveled, annoyed at the interruption to his game. I'm not cutting his meat, Mom, I said. My voice was quiet, but it felt strangely loud in the sudden pocket of silence. His mother is right there. Sadie's sister, who had been painting her own nails, looked up in vague surprise. "Well, honestly, Tessa," my mother started, a frown line appearing. I cut her off, not with anger, but with fact. "I'm also being transferred. My promotion includes a relocation. I'm moving to Austin, Texas." This, at least, held their attention. For a few seconds. "Texas?" my father scoffed. "Why would anyone want to live there? It's hotter than hell." "It's a great opportunity," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "It's for the senior device specialist role at Halcyon Vital Systems. It's a big step." My mother gave a vague, dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, well, it's so far away. You'll be all alone." She turned back to her phone. The crisis of my announcement apparently averted. "Sadie, honey, what are the sales numbers for today? Are we going to beat last Sunday?" The conversation snapped back into its original channel. The brief silence I had created was flooded, instantly, by talk of revenue, shipping costs, and customer engagement. I stood there for another 10 seconds, an invisible ghost at my own feast. Then, I picked up the plates again and walked into the kitchen. I turned on the faucet, and the roar of the water was a relief. It was a sound loud enough to drown out the live stream, loud enough to cover the feeling of my own insignificance. I scraped the leftover food into the disposal. I watched the bits of roast I had so carefully cooked get pulverized. I scrubbed the plates, one by one. The hot water stung my hands. It was here, in the steam and the smell of dish soap, that the old familiar ache settled in. It was a chronic pain, a dull throb behind my ribs that I had learned to live with, the feeling of being needed, but not wanted. I was the scaffolding of this family. I was the reliable, invisible structure that held things up. I was the one who bought the thoughtful gifts, who remembered the anniversaries, who drove to the airport at 5 a.m, and they took it, all of it, as easily as they took a breath. They took it and turned their full, undivided, adoring attention to the noise, to Sadie's glittery, $25 trinkets. I finished the last dish, dried my hands, and walked out of the kitchen. They were still at the table, clustered around the iPad now, watching a graph of Sadie's sales trend upward. I went to my childhood bedroom, the one still filled with furniture from when I was 16, and I started to pack. Later that night, long after everyone had left and the house was quiet, I lay in the dark and looked at my phone. I opened the family group chat. The last 20 messages were all links to Sadie's live stream, peppered with "so proud" and "amazing" from my parents. My thumbs moved over the keyboard. I typed it out, clear and concise, a final attempt. "Just to confirm, as I mentioned at lunch, I've been promoted to Senior Device Specialist at Halcyon Vital Systems. I'll be moving to Austin on the 15th of next month." I hit send. I watched the screen. The small delivered text changed. Read by Mom. Read by Dad. Read by Sadie. Read by Uncle Mark. I waited. 1 minute, 5, 10. The silence from the phone was as loud as the noise at the table. My message hung there, blue and sterile, in a sea of celebratory emojis for someone else. Then, my phone buzzed. A new message. My heart gave a stupid, hopeful leap. It was from my mother, a picture, not a text, a photo of Tommy, his face completely smeared with the chocolate cake I had also baked. "Look at my sweet boy," she had captioned it. Instantly, the replies flooded in. "Dad, that's my grandson." Sadie.
"Oh, so cute. LOL. And Carol, precious."
I stared at the screen, at the flurry of happy, loving responses piling up directly on top of my ignored life. The contrast was so sharp, so absolute. It was almost clinical. It wasn't malice. It wasn't deliberate cruelty. It was something worse. It was total, effortless indifference. I turned the phone over and placed it screen down on the nightstand. The next 2 weeks were a blur of logistics. I packed boxes. I sold my old car. I forwarded my mail. I worked through the quiet, methodical checklist of dismantling one life to build another. No one called to ask how the packing was going. No one offered to help. No one mentioned Austin again. I moved through the house like I always had, a functional presence, ensuring the trash was out and the bills were paid, a ghost already haunting the halls of my own home. On the 14th, I finished packing my car. The last box, filled with kitchen supplies, was sealed with a loud rip of packing tape. I let my breath out, long and slow. My lungs felt clear. I made a decision. I would not send another text. I would not make a final, just letting you know I'm leaving phone call. I would not remind them, again, that I was going. I would not beg them for a goodbye. That night, I left. I drove out of Bridgeton under a dark, moonless sky. The highway was a black ribbon spooling out in front of me, illuminated only by my headlights. The hum of the engine was the only sound. I drove for an hour, then 2, the lights of my hometown shrinking in the rearview mirror until they were just another smudge of light in the darkness. And I made a promise to myself. It wasn't angry, it was cold. It was the calmest, most certain thought I had ever had. I will never ask for permission to exist again. I was leaving Bridgeton. I was leaving the house I grew up in, the people who were supposed to be my center, because I finally understood. Home was not this. Home was not a place where you had to scream to be heard over the noise of someone else's life. Home was not a place that saw you only as a pair of hands to do the work. Home, I decided, was not a place that makes you feel like you are not a person at all. The 2 years I spent in Austin were not a recovery. They were a construction. Minnesota had been damp, the skies a uniform gray that seeped into your bones. Austin was the opposite. It was a city of dry heat and relentless, clarifying light. My condo in the Copper Ridge neighborhood was, at first, just a series of empty white boxes. The silence in those first few weeks was so profound it had a physical weight. There were no televisions blaring, no phones ringing with automated sales announcements, no distant arguments. There was only the hum of the air conditioner and the sound of my own footsteps on the new floors. My first act of settling in was not to buy a sofa. It was to take the tubes I had so carefully transported in my car and unroll their contents. I went to a frame shop and spent money I probably should have saved for furniture. A week later, I hung them. My Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering, my specialization certificate in risk management, my Excellence in Validation Award from my first year at Halcyon. They were hung in a perfect, level line in the small hallway that led to my bedroom. They were not for guests. They were for me. They were the evidence. In Bridgeton, my worth was measured in completed chores. Here, I had the receipts for my own existence. Work at Halcyon Vital Systems was the architecture of my new life. In Bridgeton, I had been good with computers. Here, I was a senior device specialist. My job was to anticipate failure. We designed and tested prosthetic limbs and advanced neuromuscular rehabilitation devices. My specific role was to live inside the what if. I did not just run the protocols. I tried to break them. My mind, which my family had treated as a useful tool for setting up their streaming services, was now my primary asset. I thought in flowcharts. I played chess against imaginary catastrophes. If the haptic sensor in this prosthetic hand is exposed to a temperature of 110 degrees for 3 hours, does the signal degrade? If it degrades, does it send a null value or a false positive to the microcontroller? A null value means the hand stops gripping. A false positive means it grips harder. I would sit in the cool, quiet lab, running simulations. I built matrices of risk, and I built protocols to mitigate them. I was methodical, I was precise, and for the first time in my life, my precision was valued, not just exploited. I built a routine, the way I would build a stable operating system. My mornings began not with a jolt of obligation, but with the quiet scent of dark roast coffee from a local roaster. I bought a French press. I found an instrumental playlist, quiet, complex cello and piano pieces that built layers of sound without demanding my attention. I would sit on my small balcony as the Texas sky turned from violet to a pale, sharp blue. In the evenings, I did something I had never been allowed to do in Bridgeton because it was too much work for everyone else. I adopted a dog. She was a rescue, a timid golden mix with one floppy ear. I named her Maple. Every evening, around 6, I would take Maple to the small park near my building. The air would be cooling, the scent of dust and dry grass rising. It was there I met Jonah. He was just a man, quiet and unassuming, who was always there with his perpetually confused-looking beagle, Orbit. For the first month, we just nodded. Then, we talked about the dogs. Then, we talked about the weather. Then, one day, he asked me what I did, and when I told him, he asked me what risk mitigation actually entailed. I explained the prosthetic hand scenario. He listened. He did not interrupt. His eyes did not glaze over. When I finished, he just said, "It sounds like you have to think of everything just to keep one person safe. That's incredible." I did not know what to do with that. A direct, unadorned compliment that was not followed by a request. It felt like a foreign language I was only just beginning to understand. The most difficult work, however, was internal. It was the careful, painful process of learning to say the word no. At Halcyon, when a colleague asked if I wanted to join a mandatory team-building happy hour on a Friday, the old Tessa would have felt the familiar spike of anxiety. They will think I am not a team player. They will be annoyed. I have to go. The new Tessa heard the request, processed it, and said, "Thank you for the invitation, but I am afraid I cannot make it tonight." I offered no excuse. I did not invent a sick relative or a prior engagement. I just declined. The colleague just said, "Okay, see you Monday." The world did not end. No one was angry. The true test came from my phone. The family group chat, which I had not left, was still a low-level hum of noise. Pictures of Tommy, links to Sadie's new products, complaints about the weather in Minnesota. At first, the old messages would pop up. "Tessa, what's the best way to ship a heavy box?" "Tessa, Dad's laptop is making a weird noise. Can you FaceTime him?" My thumbs would hover over the keyboard. The urge to be useful, to be the fixer, was a physical itch, a reflex. I was trained, like a dog, to jump at the sound of that bell. For the first 6 months, I would still answer, but with a delay. I would give short, technical, and impersonal advice. Then, one day, a message came from my mother. "Sadie is looking for a new payment processor for her website. She needs to know which one has the lowest fees for small business. Can you research it for her?" I read the message. I pictured myself at my desk in my quiet apartment, spending 3 hours of my Saturday comparing Stripe versus Square, compiling a spreadsheet of percentage points and transaction fees, all for a business that had never, not once, brought me anything but stress. I put my phone down. I took Maple for a walk. I came back. I made dinner. I read a book. I never replied. No one ever asked again. My silence, I learned, was a healthy boundary. It was not a weapon. Like the silent treatment my mother used to deploy, it was a shield. It was a layer of insulation, protecting the new, quiet house I was building inside my own mind. I filled the physical house, too. I bought a sofa in a warm terracotta color. I bought a rug with a deep blue pattern. I bought lamps that cast a soft, golden light. And I bought a bookshelf, a tall one that reached almost to the ceiling. I filled it, slowly, with books that I wanted to read. Philosophy, biographies of female scientists, thick fantasy novels. There was not a single book on that shelf that I had bought to impress someone else. My social life changed. In Bridgeton. Family time was the only time. Here, I found a small group. We had a book club. We played board games. These were activities with rules, with structure, with a defined end. They were not the chaotic, endless, draining performances of a Sunday lunch. And in 2 years, not one of my new friends, not Jonah, not my book club, ever asked me when I was going to get married. They never asked why I did not have kids. They did not see me as a collection of unfulfilled roles. They just saw me. Tessa. They asked me what I thought about the ending of the book, or how my project at Halcyon was going. About 18 months in, I got a promotion. It was quiet. My boss, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Maria, called me into her office on a Tuesday. "Tessa," she said, looking at a report on her screen, "your failure mode analysis on the Kinetic L project was airtight. You found a voltage flaw that the entire engineering team missed. It saved us a recall. I am moving you to lead the new Kinetic R product branch. It comes with a 20% raise." She did not gush. She did not throw a party. She gave me a short, specific, and data-backed piece of praise. It was the most validating thing anyone had ever said to me. That night, I opened my phone. I went to the family group chat. I looked at the endless, scrolling noise. I tapped the info button. I tapped mute. A menu popped up. 8 hours. 1 week. Always. My thumb pressed always. I held the phone in my hand and waited. I expected to feel a jolt of guilt, of fear, of profound loss. Instead, I felt my heartbeat. It was slow, steady, and normal. It was my own. I sat on my terracotta sofa, in the warm light of my chosen lamp, with my dog sleeping at my feet. A realization settled over me, as calm and as clear as the Austin sunlight. For 2 years, I had not been actively useful to anyone in my old life. I had not cut up anyone's food, or fixed a laptop, or planned a party, or offered a single piece of free advice. And yet, I was happier, more successful, and more real than I had ever been. By not trying to be useful, I had finally simply been allowed to be. The last piece of my construction was practical. The memory of being needed, the sudden, chaotic demands that always seemed to involve money or crisis, was not gone. It was a scar, and like any good specialist, I prepared for a potential failure. I opened a new bank account, a high-yield savings account, separate from my checking, separate from my retirement. With my new raise, I set up an automatic transfer. A significant portion of every paycheck went into it. This was not my vacation fund. It was not my new car fund. It was my emergency fund. But the emergency I was saving for was not my own. It was theirs. It was the no fund. It was the armor. It was the financial proof, built with my own success, that I would never, ever be put in a position where my only value was what could be taken from me. I was preparing, meticulously, for the day the silence might break. The spark that lit the fuse was not a cry for help. It was a photograph. My cousin June, who was 22 and existed in a different, lighter universe than the rest of my family, was passing through Austin on a road trip. She was the only one who had ever sent me a text that was not a request, just a weird meme or a song she thought I would like. She crashed on my sofa for 2 nights. When she walked into my condo, she dropped her duffel bag on the floor. "Tessa," she breathed. "Oh my God. This is not an apartment. This is a magazine cover. This is an aesthetic." She was, I realized, the first member of my family to ever physically see the life I had built. She walked around, running her hand over the terracotta sofa, touching the leaves of my oversized fiddle-leaf fig. "You did all this? Yourself?" "I had some help with the bookshelf," I admitted. She zeroed in on my favorite corner, the deep, comfortable armchair, the brass reading lamp that arced over it, and the teak shelf that held my small, growing collection of vinyl records. "This," she said, pulling out her phone. "This right here is everything. It's so calm. Do you mind if I take a picture? My followers need to see this vibe." I laughed and told her to go ahead. She took a few shots, capturing the way the warm light hit the spine of a record. That night, she posted it. The photograph was beautiful, but it was the caption that made my chest tighten. "My cousin Tessa's self-built sanctuary, proof that freedom has a physical form." I woke up the next morning to a sound I had not heard in 2 years. My phone was not just buzzing, it was vibrating continuously. A long, angry hum on the nightstand. The family group chat, which I kept muted, was dead. This was something else. I opened my phone, Instagram, direct messages, dozens of new follow requests. June's post had gone viral, but only within the very specific, very insular world of my extended family. The silence of 2 years had been shattered by a photo of my reading lamp. I scrolled through the comments, each one a small, sharp jab. Wow, Tessa, that looks expensive. What neighborhood is that? Copper Ridge? That's high end. You must be doing very well for yourself. What's your salary now? Is that place rented or did you buy? What's a mortgage on that? All that from your computer job? They were not seeing a sanctuary. They were seeing a balance sheet. They were calculating my income based on the price of my armchair. It was a feeding frenzy, a public audit of my perceived wealth. And then I saw it. The comment that stopped my breath. It was from my mother. Her first direct, public acknowledgement of my existence since I'd left Minnesota. We are so proud of our daughter. She is doing so well. Our daughter, as if she had been there, as if she had championed the move, as if she had ever once asked me how I was. It was not a compliment. It was a claim. It was an act of public ownership, staking her flag in my territory. My pulse was a high, thin wire in my ears. I was still trying to process the sheer, calculated audacity of it when a text message notification appeared at the top of my screen. It was from June. Hey, this is super awkward, the message began. But my mom is freaking out in our family chat, and then Sadie sent this to my mom. I don't know what's going on, but I feel like you need to see it. Below the text was a screenshot, a private message, from Sadie to her own mother, June's aunt. The text in the screenshot was frantic, sharp, and misspelled. Mom, you need to talk to Aunt Tessa's mom, right now. Did you see June's picture? Tessa's place looks expensive, like really expensive. She has to have money. Ask her how much she has extra. This is the answer. We need that $39K urgently. Tell Aunt Tessa's mom to call her, now. I read the message. I read it again, and a third time. $39,000. There it was, the specific, cold number. This was not a vague cry for help. This was a bill. They had a $39,000 problem, and in the reflection of my brass reading lamp, they had just found their solution. The old Tessa, the Bridgeton Tessa, would have been crumbling. Panic, nausea, a crippling wave of guilt. They're in trouble. Sadie is in trouble. I have to help. That's what family does. But I was not that Tessa. I was the Tessa who built risk matrices for a living. My heart rate, which had spiked, suddenly returned to its resting state. The panic was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The flowcharts in my head clicked into place. Input: 2 years of total silence. Input: 1 photograph of perceived wealth. Input: 1 public, strategic claim of pride from my mother. Input: 1 specific, large, external debt. Predicted output: imminent. Highly emotional contact demanding a financial transfer, disguised as a family crisis. I was not a daughter. I was not a cousin. I was an untapped resource. I was the emergency fund they had just discovered. Jonah came by a few hours later, bringing our customary Saturday morning coffees. He took one look at my face and set the cups down. Everything okay? You look like you just ran a failure protocol on your own life. I did not say a word. I just handed him my phone. I watched him read June's text, then the screenshot. His eyebrows climbed his forehead. He read it again, then looked up at me. Wow, he said, his voice low. 39,000. 39,000, I confirmed. Are you going to respond to any of this? He asked, gesturing to the phone, which was still buzzing with comments and follow requests. A smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of an engineer who has just found the critical design flaw. No, I said. Not yet. They found the house. Now, I'm going to wait and see exactly how they choose to knock on the door. I did not have to wait long. The call came at 11:15 that night, late enough to be an intrusion, late enough to catch me sleepy, vulnerable, and off guard. The screen lit up. Mom! I let it ring 3 times. I took a slow, deep breath, centering myself. Then I answered. Hello? There was a sharp, theatrical intake of breath on the other end. Then, a voice I barely recognized, thick with a syrupy, rehearsed emotion. Tessa? Oh, honey. My darling. It is so good to hear your voice. I said nothing. The silence stretched, and I let it. We saw, she finally continued, the brightness straining. We saw the picture June posted. Oh, honey, you're home. It's just beautiful. We are just so proud of you. Your father and I. We just miss you terribly. You miss me, I thought, or you miss the idea of my bank account. It's been a long time, Mom, I said. My voice was level, neutral, the voice I used with vendors. Too long, she chirped, the fake cheer so loud it hurt my ear. Way too long, which is why, well, your father and I, we were just talking, and we miss you too much. We just decided, we're flying down tomorrow. We'll be there around noon. The air left my lungs in a silent rush, not a request, an announcement. This was not a visit, it was a deployment. That's very sudden, I managed to say. I know, it's crazy, but we just had to see our girl. We can't wait. We'll just grab a cab from the airport. Before I could formulate a response, before I could invent a single boundary, my phone buzzed with a text notification against my ear. I pulled it away for a second. A new message from Sadie. Hey, heard we're all coming to see you tomorrow. So exciting. Congrats on the new place. It looks amazing. We're bringing one of your favorite cakes. My blood went ice cold. Not just my parents. Sadie, the one with the $39,000 problem, was coming too, and they were bringing a cake. Tessa, you still there? Honey? My mother's voice cooed from the speaker. I'm here, I said. My voice was calm again. Tomorrow at noon. I'll see you then. I hung up before she could reply. I stood in the perfect, constructed silence of my sanctuary, the home June had called freedom. I looked at the brass lamp. I looked at the terracotta sofa. They were not just things. They were the physical evidence of my escape. They were my armor. And my family was coming to liquidate it. I placed my phone face down on the granite countertop. The buzzing of notifications, which had started again, was instantly muffled by the cold, hard stone. My mind went to the high-yield savings account, the no fund, the armor I had been building, one paycheck at a time, for an emergency I knew would one day arrive. For 2 years, my plan had been one of defense, build walls, mute notifications, create distance. They had just announced they were breaching the walls. My mind shifted. The flowcharts rearranged themselves. This was no longer about defense. This was about control. They had set the time, but I would set the terms. They were walking into my house, my territory. This was no longer a retreat. This was an offense. The chime of the doorbell was sharp, precise, 12:15, exactly as they had announced. I stood in the center of my living room, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I did not move toward the door. I began to count, my breath even, my pulse a steady, metronomic beat. 1. The sound of the chime was still echoing. 2. I heard a muffled voice from the hallway, my mother's. 3. The second doorbell chime, longer this time, more insistent. 4. I analyzed the sound. It was not panic. It was entitlement, the sound of someone who expects a door to open for them. 5. I thought about the risk mitigation protocols at work. You never react to an alarm instantly. You verify. You assess. 6. This was my protocol. This 10-second buffer was my airlock, separating my old life from my new one. 7. In this space, I was not their daughter. I was the homeowner. 8. I was not the fixer. I was the gatekeeper. 9. The old frantic urge to please, to rush, to apologize for the delay, was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, quiet calm. 10. I took one final, grounding breath and walked to the door. I turned the deadbolt. The thunk was loud and definitive. I opened it. The performance began instantly. Tessa! Oh, honey. My mother lunged forward, pulling me into a hug that was all angles and desperation. Her perfume hit me first. The same cloying, heavy floral scent she had worn for 20 years. It was the smell of Sunday obligations, of unspoken tension over dinner, of being trapped in the passenger seat of her car. It was not the smell of affection. It was the smell of ownership. I stood still, my arms lightly at my sides, a statue being briefly embraced. "Hi, Mom." Behind her, my father. He just grunted, his eyes already aimed past my shoulder, into my home. He carried a small roller bag. He did not hug me. "Game's on today," he said, as if we were picking up a conversation from yesterday. He stepped past me, his gaze locking onto the large television mounted on the far wall. The remote was exactly where I had left it, on the coffee table, a deliberate piece of bait. He moved toward it with the singular focus of an animal drawn to a salt lick. He had not looked me in the eye. Then came the rest of the storm. "Aunt Tessa!" Sadie pushed in behind him, a brittle, high-wattage smile plastered on her face, and she was not alone. She was pushing her son, Tommy, and holding the hand of a smaller girl I did not recognize. "This is the new one. Gemma," Sadie announced, as if presenting an accessory. The kids, released from the confines of the apartment hallway, exploded into the space. Their shoes squeaked on my polished hardwood floors as they made a beeline for the windows, their hands outstretched toward my vinyl collection. "Wow, Tess, this place is huge." Sadie laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Kids, look at this. Don't touch, but look." Tommy, who was now 6, immediately put his sticky fingers on the glass of my balcony door. Gemma, the new one, made a grab for the turntable. Sadie just laughed again, that same hollow, useless sound. "Oh, kids, they're just so curious." "Sadie," my voice cut through the noise. It was not loud, but it was absolute. Everyone stopped, even my father, his hand hovering over the remote. I looked at the children, then I looked at my cousin. "In this house, we do not run," I said, my voice calm and low. "And we do not touch the items on the shelves. They are not toys." The silence that followed was heavy, shocked. Sadie's smile froze, the edges cracking. My mother's face hardened into the familiar lines of disapproval. I had broken the script. I was supposed to be the cool aunt, the one who was so grateful for their presence that she would allow her home to be dismantled. Sadie's face flushed. "Right, of course. Gemma, honey, stop." She then thrust a white cardboard box at me, a shield to cover the awkwardness. "Here, we brought your favorite. Triple chocolate fudge from Miller's. We remembered." I looked at the box, my favorite. Since I was 6 years old, my favorite cake had been strawberry shortcake. I had asked for it, specifically, every single birthday, and almost every single birthday. I had received a chocolate cake because everyone else preferred chocolate. This box, this thoughtful gift, was not a kind gesture. It was a 28-year-old habit of not listening. It was the perfect, frosted, multi-layered symbol of their indifference. "Thank you, Sadie," I said, taking the box. The weight was generic. "I will put this in the kitchen." I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the entryway. I placed the cake on the kitchen counter. I did not get a knife. I did not get plates. I left it there, a monument to their assumptions. When I returned, they had arranged themselves in my living room. My father was on the sofa, remote in hand, flicking through sports channels. The game had not started, but he was already establishing dominance over the screen. My mother had taken the other end of the sofa, her purse placed on the cushion beside her like a territorial marker. Sadie, and the now sulking children, had taken the floor. I did not sit on the sofa with them. I sat in my armchair, the armchair from the photograph, the one that, in their minds, represented $39,000. The balance of power was set. They were in my space. I was in my chair. "Can I get anyone some tea, water?" I asked. It was the question of a host, not a daughter. Tea would be lovely, my mother said, her eyes already scanning. They were not admiring, they were appraising, calculating. Her gaze moved from the brass lamp to the rug, to the bookshelf. I went to the kitchen, the open-plan design meaning I never turned my back on them. I boiled the water. I got out my mugs, the heavy ceramic ones I had bought one by one, not a mismatched set of inherited junk. I served them. I placed the mugs on the coasters I had already laid out. The interrogation, disguised as small talk, began immediately. This is just... Wow. Tessa, my mother started, blowing on her tea. Halcyon must be paying you a ton of money for that specialist job. The benefits package is good, I said, sipping my own tea. Good? Honey, this is more than good, Sadie chimed in, her voice dripping with a forced, covetous awe. Look at this view. You have to be in their highest pay bracket. Did you get in on their stock options? I hear that's where the real money is. It is a competitive company, I replied, my voice perfectly neutral. I bet, my father grunted from the sofa, his eyes still on the pre-game analysis. Probably got a heck of a mortgage. Though, what's your rate? Did you get it locked in before the hike? I hope you did not get an adjustable rate. They were pulling, one by one, at the threads of my finances, salary, stocks, loans. They were trying to build a map of my bank account. I took another sip of tea. I let the silence sit for a second. They were all leaning forward. Even my father was listening with one ear. I turned my head, not to them, but to him. Dad, I said, my voice warm for the first time. How is the Bridgerton Youth League going? I saw the town council was debating the field budgets again. Did you manage to secure the funding for the new uniforms? It was a perfect pivot. My father, derailed from his financial probing, blinked. He sat up, the remote momentarily forgotten. The uniforms? It's a nightmare. Tessa, the council is trying to cut us by 20%. 20! I told them. I said, you can't do this to these kids, but they don't listen. He was off. He was launched into a 10-minute monologue about municipal budgets, ungrateful parents, and the price of aluminum bats. I sat back in my armchair, sipping my tea. I watched my mother's face tighten. This was not the plan. I watched Sadie, whose fingers had begun a rapid, impatient tap-tap-tap of her acrylic nail against the side of her porcelain mug. Click, click, click. The sound was a tiny, frantic drumbeat in the room. Get to the point. Get to the money. Get to the $39,000. My father finally wound down, ending on a bitter note about umpire fees. The silence that fell was sharp. The interrogation had been stalled, but the engine was still running. My mother seized the moment. Her gaze, which had been cataloging my possessions, finally landed on me. Well, she said, her voice laced with a judgment so thick I could almost smell it, like burning plastic. You certainly seem to have spent a lot. This all must have cost a pretty penny. It was not a question. It was an accusation. The unspoken words hung in the air. You bought all this for yourself. You bought a rug and a lamp, while your family... Click, click, click. Sadie's fingernail was getting faster. The kids, bored by the adult talk, were starting to whine and pull at her. Mommy, I'm hungry. Mommy, can I watch my show? Sadie's composure was fracturing. Shh, in a minute. Just stop. This was my opening. I set my mug down. I stood, walked over to a low credenza by the wall, and pulled open a drawer. Inside, I had placed 2 brand-new, shrink-wrapped illustrated children's books and a fresh box of crayons. I had bought them at 9 this morning. I walked over to the children. I did not ask Sadie's permission. Tommy, I said, crouching down. This one is about a space robot. And Gemma, this one is about a dragon who loves to draw. I placed the books and the crayons on the rug, a safe distance from any furniture. You can sit here and color, as long as you are quiet. The children, starved for stimulation, stared at the bright covers and immediately sat down, tearing at the plastic. I stood up and looked at Sadie. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked startled, and then, for a brief second, grateful, and then, overwhelmingly, she looked furious. I had just effortlessly managed the one thing she could not. Her own children. I had provided for them, quietly and efficiently, without breaking a sweat. I walked back to my armchair and sat down. The volume in the room had dropped by half. My father was watching the television. The children were quiet. My mother and Sadie were staring at me. The air in the room had changed. It was thick, charged. This was not a casual family visit. It was not a reunion. It was a confrontation. And I had just taken control of the territory, the agenda, and the participants. They were the ones who had flown here. They were the ones with the unspoken, urgent need. They were the ones with the ticking clock. And I was the one, sitting in my expensive armchair, waiting, perfectly, patiently, for them to make the next move. The power to define this meeting was no longer theirs. It was mine. The click, click, click of Sadie's fingernails stopped. My father, sensing a cue, muted the television. The abrupt silence was a vacuum, pulling all the air out of the room. It was a stage, perfectly set. My mother began the performance. It was not a simple sigh. It was a theatrical exhalation, a long, shuddering release of air that had been practiced. It was a sound engineered over decades to produce one specific, automatic response. "What's wrong, Mom?" I refused to say the line. I sat, still and silent, in my armchair. I waited. Her hand, which had been holding her tea mug, came up to her chest. Her eyes, when they met mine, were glistening. The speed with which she had summoned the tears was almost impressive. "Tessa," she said, her voice a perfect, engineered tremor. "Honey, we didn't just come down here to see your beautiful new place. We're in trouble. We're in terrible, terrible trouble." On cue, as if a stage manager had whispered in her ear. Sadie dropped her face into her hands. The sound she made, a muffled sob, was just loud enough to be heard. The two children looked up from their coloring, their faces miniature masks of confusion. "It's Sadie," my mother continued, her voice dropping to a confidential, tragic whisper. She placed her hand on Sadie's supposedly weeping shoulder. "It's the boutique. You know how hard she's worked. Honey, that awful landlord, he's ruining her." I said nothing. My face remained neutral. I was an analyst receiving an initial damage report. "The foot traffic, it just died," Sadie said, her voice thick and muffled by her palms. "I couldn't make the rent. Tess, I couldn't, and he's closing me down. He's taking everything." She signed a personal guarantee. Tessa. My mother cut in, translating the emotional plea into a business term she knew I would understand. This was the data point. It wasn't a corporate lease. It's all on her. They're coming after her personally. My father completed the tableau. He let out a low, pained groan, as if he'd been struck, and shook his head at the floor, his face a mask of profound, masculine gravity. "It's a complete disaster, a total, unmitigated mess." The room was quiet again. The accusation laid. I knew my next line. "How bad is it?" My voice was clinical, stripped of all emotion. My mother and Sadie exchanged a look, the "who will say the number" glance. My mother took the lead. "With all the back rent, and the penalties for breaking the lease, and the inventory she's on the hook for, they're saying she needs—" She hesitated, turning to Sadie, offering her the dramatic climax. Sadie looked up, her eyes perfectly red-rimmed. $39,000. The number hung in the air. $39,000, she repeated, her voice cracking. "By the first of the month, or he's suing me into bankruptcy. He'll take my car. He'll put a lien on my house." 39,000, the exact figure from the screenshot. They hadn't even bothered to inflate it for negotiation. They had come with the bill. I sat there, watching them, the silence stretched. In their script, this was my cue. I was supposed to gasp. I was supposed to say, Oh my God, that's horrible. What can I do? How can I help? How can... I said nothing. I was simply observing. The performance was good, but the motivation was weak. My mother, sensing my failure to follow the script, leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. It became a poisonous, confidential syrup. "Honey," she said, gesturing around my living room, at my sofa, my lamp, my bookshelves. "We saw how well you're doing. This is all just so wonderful, but it's just stuff, isn't it?" My blood did not run cold. It evaporated. I knew, with a horrible, lucid clarity, what she was about to say. "You're so smart with money," she continued, her smile thin and desperate. "You're doing so well. I was just saying to your father on the plane, this condo, you could sell it, easily, in this market." The sentence landed on the glass coffee table between us with the physical weight of a cinder block. "You could sell this place, clear this up for Sadie, and still have more than enough left over to get a nice, smaller apartment. It would be so simple. Tessa, a clean fix." It was not a request for a loan. It was not a request for help. It was an order to self-destruct. It was a demand that I liquidate the very fortress I had built to escape them, that I set fire to my 2 years of peace, my security, my evidence, all to plug a hole in her favorite sinking ship. Before I could even form a word, Sadie lunged forward, playing her part. She had her props ready. "Tessa, please," she cried, and she reached out, grabbing Tommy by the shoulder and pulling him against her. He looked terrified. "You have to think about the children. Please, I can't lose my house. Where will they live? Do you want your nephew and your niece to be homeless?" There it was, the emotional artillery. The children were not just guests. They were human shields. They were the tactical, emotional collateral. I sat back in my armchair. I did not look at them. I looked at the wall above their heads. But in my mind, I was seeing a flowchart. I saw the risk matrix. Risk, financial ruin of a family member, Sadie. Emotional weight, high by design. Actors, mother, primary negotiator, emotional architect. Sadie, designated victim, leverage. Father, silent gravitas, support. Children, emotional props, human shield. Rehearsal, the 2-hour and 40-minute flight from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Austin, Bergstrom. They ran these lines. They practiced this scenario. My mother rehearsed the sigh. Sadie practiced the tears. They decided who would say the number. They planned the sell the condo suggestion as their audacious opening bid, assuming I would bargain them down to a simple cash transfer. I was not a participant in this drama. I was the audience. I was the case study. I leaned forward. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not yell. I merely asked a simple, analytical question. 2 years ago, I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the thick, manufactured grief. When I posted in the family group chat that I had received a promotion and was moving to Austin, who replied? The effect was instantaneous. It was as if I had pulled the main circuit breaker on their entire production. My mother's mouth, which had been open to deliver another line of guilt, snapped shut. Sadie's tear-streaked face went utterly blank. My father actually looked up from the floor, his brow furrowed in genuine, unscripted confusion. The room was completely, utterly, and devastatingly silent. What? What does that have to do with anything? My mother finally stammered, her eyes darting between me and my father. Who replied? I repeated. I did not blink. They looked at each other. They were scrambling, searching their memories, not for the answer, but for the trap. The answer, of course, was no one. They knew it. I knew it. The silence itself was the confession. Tessa, that's not fair, my mother said, her voice shifting instantly, the grief evaporating, replaced by the hard, brittle edge of a cornered animal. We were busy. We were worried about you, my father added, clumsily, trying to cover the retreat. Moving so far away, all alone. You were so busy, I stated, not as a question. That for 2 years, no one called, not one time, not until June posted a picture of this armchair. My mother saw the ground she had lost. She saw that the logic of her victim play had been shattered. She abandoned it instantly and shifted to her final, most reliable weapon: pure, unfiltered guilt. "Your father and I are not going to be here forever, Tessa," she said, her voice cold now, all pretense of sadness gone. "Is this how you want to leave things? Is this the kind of person you are? Willing to let your family drown over some old grudge because no one sent you a text message?" "It's not a grudge, Mom. It's a data point." My father sensed her failure and, for the first time, entered the negotiation directly, but he fumbled his lines. "We're just trying to keep this family together. We know you're not alone. Down here, that man. June told us. Jonah." I went perfectly still. This was new information. "He seems to be doing well for himself," my father continued, pushing what he thought was an advantage. "I'm sure he has resources. When you're a family, you help each other. I'm sure he would understand. You two could probably handle this without you having to sell anything." The sheer, invasive filth of it was breathtaking. They had not just appraised my condo, they had appraised my boyfriend. They had investigated Jonah. They were no longer just asking for my money. They were calculating his. They were assessing my entire life, my entire support system, as their new, unlimited line of credit. I looked at the three of them: my mother, the hostile negotiator, my father, the clumsy enforcer, Sadie, the designated victim, waiting for her bailout. They were not a family. They were a hostile takeover bid. But I would not give them a no, not yet. A no was a declaration of war, and I was not ready to show them my entire strategy. I would not give them a yes. A yes was unconditional surrender. I would give them nothing. I would give them my process. I stood up. The movement was crisp, decisive. It signaled, unequivocally, that the meeting was over. "This is a significant amount of information," I said. My voice was the voice of Halcyon Vital Systems. It was the voice of the senior device specialist. And a $39,000 request is not a small one. Their faces began to fall. Sadie looked like she was about to protest. "I am not giving you an answer today," I said, and then I delivered the line that I knew they would misinterpret. "I need time to review this." Their faces changed. Sadie and my mother exchanged a look. It was subtle, a tiny, almost imperceptible easing of the tension in their shoulders. It was relief. My father nodded, as if this was a reasonable, expected step in any business deal. Right. Run the numbers. Tessa, that's what you're good at." They misunderstood, completely and beautifully. They thought review meant liquidate. They thought I was checking my accounts to see how quickly I could make the wire transfer. They thought this was a procedural delay before their victory. They thought they had won. I saw the smug, satisfied relaxation in my mother's jaw. I saw the watery, grateful smile begin to form on Sadie's face. My internal camera zoomed in on them, capturing the data. My mind was already moving, the flowcharts branching. I was not running the numbers. I was verifying the data. I was assessing the threat. I was preparing my mitigation strategy. I was not their walking wallet. I was not their daughter, the fixer. I was an analyst, and this crisis was now my project. I escorted them to the door. My mother, brimming with a sudden, false confidence, squeezed my arm. "You're a good girl, Tessa. We knew you'd understand. For the family, right?" I smiled, a tight, brief, neutral expression I had perfected in corporate meetings. "I will be in touch when my review is complete." I closed the door. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy, satisfying thunk, the sound of an airlock sealing. The performance was over. The analysis had begun. I did not clean up their tea mugs. I did not touch the chocolate cake, which sat on my counter like a dark, sugary accusation. I walked directly to my small home office, took the large whiteboard from against the wall, the one I used for mapping Halcyon's complex risk protocols, and placed it on its stand in the middle of my living room. This was my lab. They were my project. I took a black dry erase marker. I drew a vertical line down the center. On the left, I wrote, "Contact from family, Bridgeton." On the right, "Tessa's status, Austin." I started at the beginning, month 1, post-move. On the right, I wrote, "New apartment, new job." On the left, I wrote, "Silence." Month 6, on the right. First performance review, on the left, silence. Year 1, month 3. On the right, my 29th birthday, on the left, silence. Year 1, month 10. On the right, promoted, pre-senior role, on the left, silence. I filled the board, 2 years of my achievements on one side, and 2 years of a flat, unbroken line of indifference on the other. Then, at the bottom, I wrote, Year 2, month 4, event, June's Instagram post, the condo. I drew an arrow from that event to the very next line. Response time, less than 24 hours. Under contact, I listed the flood of data. Public comments, appraisal of wealth. Mother's pride post, public claim of ownership. Sadie's screenshot, the 39K figure identified. The invasion, emotional financial demand. I stood back. The pattern was not a suggestion. It was a diagnosis. I was not a family member. I was a dormant asset. My value had not been realized until it was photographed. My next step in any protocol, verify the inputs. They had presented me with a crisis. I needed to know if the crisis was real. I sat at my laptop. My hands, which had been so steady while serving them tea, were now moving with the rapid, quiet efficiency of my job. I was not a daughter. I was a researcher. I started with the Minnesota Secretary of State business portal, Sadie's Sparkle Boutique, LLC, formed 3 years ago. The registration was active. So far, true. Next, I accessed the public court records for their county. They had named the landlord. I typed his name into the civil suit database. He was real, and he was busy. A long, scrolling list of eviction proceedings and breach of contract suits against other small businesses. They were right. He was a shark. So the threat was real. This was not a fabrication. I refined the search. The landlord's name versus Sadie's. Bingo. A civil filing from 3 weeks prior. Judgment by confession. My stomach tightened. It was a predatory, but legal. Document often buried in commercial leases. It meant that by signing the lease, Sadie had agreed that if she defaulted, the landlord could get an automatic judgment against her without a trial. She had waived her right to fight. I scrolled down to the scanned signature page of the original lease, attached as an exhibit. I was looking for my father's name, my mother's. I found only one, Sadie L. Whitlow. She, and she alone, had signed the personal guarantee. This was the first lie. My mother's performance, "We're in terrible trouble," was a deliberate misrepresentation. Sadie was in trouble. They were attempting to socialize a private debt. My phone buzzed. A text from June. "Tessa, I am so sorry. My mom is going crazy. She just forwarded me an email your mom sent to the entire extended family. I think you need to see this." I opened the forwarded email. The subject line read, "A hard time for our family." I read the words, my blood cooling with every sentence. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. "As you know," my mother had written, "our dear Sadie has hit a roadblock. In these hard times, it falls on all of us to pull together. We are a family that helps our own. It is the duty of those who have been blessed with plenty to step up and provide the foundation for those who are struggling. We are all responsible for making sure these children are safe." She had not named me. She did not have to. "Blessed with plenty," combined with June's viral photo, was a sniper shot aimed directly at me. She was not just asking me for money. She was preemptively painting me as a moral failure to the entire family if I refused. She was manufacturing my guilt on a mass scale. I leaned back, looking from the email to the whiteboard. The pattern of one-way prioritization snapped into sharp focus. This was not new. My college graduation party, which had been merged with a "Congratulations, Sadie" barbecue, because Sadie had, that same week, gotten a certification to be a yoga instructor. My valedictorian speech was cut short so my father could make a toast to Sadie's new path, my 21st birthday, which was postponed and then forgotten, because Sadie had broken up with a boyfriend and my mother simply couldn't handle planning a party while Sadie was so upset. I was the scaffolding. I was the reliable, structural support, expected to bear any load, celebrate any minor achievement of others, and do it all silently, while never, ever needing anything for myself. The doorbell rang, a short, familiar rhythm. Jonah. I let him in. He had coffee. He stopped dead when he saw the whiteboard, taking in the full analytical breakdown. "This," he said, gesturing to the board, "is the most terrifyingly calm response to a family crisis I have ever seen." "They're calling it a family crisis," I said, taking the coffee. "The data says it's a personal financial default." I told him everything, the $39,000, the sell the condo suggestion, the personal guarantee, the email. He was quiet for a full minute, his expression hardening. "Tessa, they didn't just ask for money, they gave you an execution order for the life you built. And that email, that's not a request, that's a threat. She's laying a public trap for you." "They're leveraging a real debt," I said. "The landlord is real, the judgment is real, the number is real." "All the more reason," he said, touching my arm. "This is not a family problem. This is a business negotiation, and you are not their bank. You need to set binding terms. If you decide to help, and that is a massive if, you cannot just give them the money. You need a contract. You need collateral. You need to treat this exactly like what it is." He was right. This was my field. Risk mitigation. The next morning, I made a call. I didn't call a family lawyer. I didn't want to start that expensive clock. I called Sarah, a colleague in the contracts department at Halcyon. "Sarah," I said, "hypothetical question, not for work. If a private individual were to loan a significant sum, say, in the 5 figures, to a high-risk family member, what's the standard framework?" I heard her sigh through the phone. "The standard framework. Tessa? Don't. That's the framework. It's a gift, not a loan, no matter what they call it." "But if you had to," I pressed, "if you wanted to protect the asset, what's the protocol?" "Okay," she said, her voice shifting into work mode. "If you're forced, you need 3 things. 1, a formal promissory note. Get it notarized. It needs the amount, the repayment schedule, and the interest rate. 2, you must secure the loan. You need collateral, a car, a boat, property. You file a UCC-1 lien against that asset. It means they can't sell it until you're paid. 3, a default clause. If payment is missed by X days, the lender has the right to. It's the only way to have a single tooth in the agreement. Otherwise, you're just writing a check." I thanked her and hung up. A promissory note, collateral, a default clause. That evening, I sat at my desk. My true goal was no longer just to say no. My goal was to test their motive. Were they here for a solution, or were they here for a windfall? I opened a new document. I began to type. I prepared 3, and only 3, possible responses. Option A, the polite refusal, a single, clearly worded page. It stated that, after a review, I was not in a financial position to help. It made no mention of their silence, no mention of the past. It was a clean, simple, and absolute no to any financial aid. It ended with a polite, "I wish you the best in finding a solution." Option B, the non-cash restructuring plan. I spent 2 hours on this. I used my analytical skills. Sadie's immediate problem was $39,000. Her real problem was a failed business model with massive overhead, Giving her the money was like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. My proposal was a detailed, 3-page plan. Phase 1. Immediate liquidation of all remaining inventory via a 72-hour online flash sale. Phase 2. Dissolution of the LLC. Use the liquidation funds to negotiate a settlement with the landlord, often possible for a fraction of the full amount just to close the case. Phase 3. Relaunch as a pop-up and order-on-demand online model. No inventory, no rent. It was a solution. It required work and humility, not my cash. Option C. The secured loan. This was the one that made my hands shake, just slightly. As I typed it, I used a standard legal template, a formal, 5-page promissory note for the full amount, $39,000. Loan term, 24 months, interest rate, 1%. The legal minimum to make it a formal loan and not a gift. Collateral, the loan would be secured by a lien against Sadie's 2023 model SUV and my father's 20-foot fishing boat, the one he treasured more than his own house. Default clause. If a single payment was missed by more than 30 days, I would have the right to take possession of the assets. I printed all 3 options on heavy, 32-pound bond paper. I slipped each one into its own separate, crisp, manila envelope. I placed them on my coffee table. This was the test. If they wanted a real, long-term solution, they would take option B. If they were truly desperate and willing to be held accountable, they would sign option C. If they wanted free money? If they had come here simply to cash in the check they believed my condo represented? They would reject all 3. This was my failure mode analysis, and I was ready to see which system failed. I sent the text at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was not a request. It was a calendar invitation. Subject, financial review meeting. Time, 10 a.m. Location, Sable Point Tower. 12th floor, Sable Lounge. I gave them no room to decline, no option to change the venue. My condo was my home, my territory. I would not allow it to be a negotiating room ever again. Their hotel room was their territory, where they had rehearsed their lines. The co-working space at Sable Point was neutral. It was a space of brushed steel, gray felt upholstery, and sound-dampening glass. It was a room where emotion had no traction, a place where spreadsheets and contracts were born. It was my ground. I arrived at 9:30. I arranged the table, a glass carafe of chilled water, 3 glasses, upside down, on clean coasters, 3 black, fine-tipped pens, in front of each of the 3 guest chairs. I placed a single, printed sheet. It was an agenda. 1. Review of financial liability. Sadie L. Whitlow. 2. Presentation of solution pathways. 3. Decision and adjournment. I sat at the head of the table. I did not check my phone. I waited. They arrived at 10:02. They looked wrong here. My mother's floral perfume was a cloying, organic thing in this sterile, recycled air. Sadie's eyes were puffy, her face set in a mask of practiced tragedy. My father just looked wary, his eyes darting to the glass walls as if he were an animal in a high-tech trap. They saw the setup. My mother's hand went to her throat. "Tessa, what is all this?" she asked. "It looks like an interrogation." "It's a meeting," I said, my voice calm. It echoed slightly in the quiet room. "Please, sit." They sat. They stared at the pens. They did not touch the water. I did not wait for them to settle. I began. "Thank you for coming. I have completed my review. Before we start, we have one rule." I looked at each of them. "Today, we are not going to talk about the past. We will not be using phrases like, 'for the family,' and we will not discuss who was or was not busy 2 years ago. This is not a discussion about feelings. This is a meeting to find a solution for the $39,000 debt. Is that clear?" My mother's mouth opened, then snapped shut. My father gave a single, curt nod. "Good," I said. "Item 1, the financial liability." I slid a document across the table. It was the flowchart I had made. This is a financial map of the boutique, based on the information you provided and my own research. As you can see, the business model itself was flawed. Your monthly overhead, Sadie, specifically the commercial lease, represented 62% of your gross revenue. This business was not sustainable. It was designed to fail. Sadie recoiled, as if the paper had burned her. I worked so hard. I am not questioning your work. I cut her off, my voice still level. I am identifying the systemic failure. Your immediate crisis is the $39,000 judgment. Your actual problem is that you have a high-cost, low-profit business model. We are here to solve both. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out 3 thick manila envelopes. I laid them on the table in a precise, fanned-out line. I have prepared 3 distinct pathways for you to choose from, I said. Option A, Option B, and Option C. Their eyes were fixed on the envelopes. They were expecting a check. I was giving them a corporate strategy session. I tapped the middle envelope. We will begin with Option B. This is the non-cash restructuring plan. I pulled out the 3-page proposal. This is, in my professional opinion, the best solution. It requires no new debt. It involves 3 phases. Phase 1. We dissolve the LLC. Phase 2. We run an aggressive 72-hour online liquidation sale of your remaining inventory. Phase 3. We use that cash. I estimate you could clear $20,000 to negotiate a settlement with the landlord. He will take a smaller, guaranteed payment now over a long, drawn-out bankruptcy proceeding where he gets nothing. Finally, Phase 4. You relaunch your brand as a low-overhead, order-on-demand e-commerce business. No rent, no inventory, no debt. This is a real, sustainable solution. I finished. They stared at me. But, Sadie stammered, but what about the $39,000? That doesn't give me the money. It solves the problem, I countered. It eliminates the debt without you having to pay the full amount, and it gives you a viable business model moving forward. It requires work, but it is a complete solution. I can't, she whispered, shaking her head. I can't. All that work. It's gone. Very well, I said. I slid the restructuring plan neatly back into its envelope. The sound was crisp. I tapped the next envelope. Option C, the secured loan. I saw my mother's shoulders relax. I saw the flash of relief in Sadie's eyes. This was the one. This was the check. I pulled out the 5-page document and slid a copy to each of them. This, I said, is a formal, legally binding promissory note for the full $39,000. Sadie actually reached for one of the pens. The loan term, I continued, is 24 months. The interest rate is 1%, the lowest possible symbolic rate to make this a legal loan and not a gift. The repayment schedule is clearly detailed on page 3. Fine, my mother said, waving her hand. Whatever, it's just a formality. My hand remained on the document. It is not a formality, I said. A loan of this size, especially in a high-risk scenario, requires collateral. Page 4. The air in the room became thin. The loan, I said, reading from the document, will be secured by 2 assets. 1. The 2023 SUV, registered to Sadie L. Whitlow, and 2. To meet the full value, the 20-foot fishing boat, registered to my father. The silence was so total. I could hear the hum of the lights. You can't be serious, my mother whispered. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry hack. Tessa, this is family. You don't use paperwork. You don't ask your father for his boat. This was the pivot, the moment the entire meeting had been built for. I met her gaze. My voice was not cold. It was reasonable. Paperwork is what keeps the peace. Mom, it makes all expectations clear. It protects everyone involved. It protects me from being resented, and it protects you from any misunderstandings. Protects who? Sadie suddenly yelled, her tragic mask shattering, revealing the hot, ugly rage beneath. This protects you. You're trying to take my car. I am not taking your car. Sadie, I said, my voice unflinching. I am asking you to secure the loan you are requesting. If you make the payments, you never lose it. You are simply guaranteeing your own debt. You are taking on the risk, instead of transferring 100% of it to me. I need that car, she shouted, pointing at the paper. It's how I get my children to school. It's for my business. The business that just failed? I asked, simply. She recoiled. She turned, desperate, to my father. Dad, tell her, your boat. That was Grandpop's boat. It's a family heirloom. My father, who had been staring at the contract as if it were a snake, slowly raised his head. His face was a dark, mottled red. He was not looking at me with confusion. He was looking at me with the pure, uncomplicated fury of a man who has just been blocked. You'd take your father's boat? He said, his voice a low growl. I am asking you to co-sign a loan for your niece's failed business, I corrected him. If you believe in her, it's no risk. If you don't, why are you asking me to? He had no answer. I let the toxic silence hang in the air. Then I moved to the final envelope. There is a third option, I said. I tapped the last envelope. Option A, the refusal. I slid the single sheet of paper out. This document states that, after a review, I am not in a position to assist financially with this matter. It is a clean, polite, and absolute no. It also states that I am, as always, willing to have a relationship with all of you. Provided that relationship respects my personal and financial boundaries, this, I said, is the default option if we cannot agree on B or C. They were trapped. Option B, the solution, work. Option C, the loan, accountability. Option A, the boundary, the no. My mother was shaking her head, tears of genuine, hot frustration streaming down her face. I don't know who you are, she whispered. I don't know how you became this. So cold. We are your family. We came to you for help. No, I said, my voice quiet, but it filled the room. You came to me for money. It's the same thing, Sadie shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. No, I said, standing up. It is not. I looked at my mother's furious, defeated face. I looked at Sadie, who was trembling with rage. And I looked at my father. He had looked away from me. He was staring down at his own hands, resting on the steel table. He was looking at them as if they were foreign objects. This is the final question, I said, and all the clinical neutrality left my voice, replaced by a cold, hard finality. You have 3 options in front of you. You must now decide. What was the goal of this visit? Did you come here for a long-term solution? Or did you come here for unconditional money? The silence that followed was the answer. It was the confession. Sadie's mouth was open, but no sound came out. My mother just wept, defeated by logic. My father, he didn't move. He just kept staring at his own hands. He knew. He had been my mother's silent enforcer for 30 years, and he had just walked into a room where his power was useless. They hadn't come to negotiate. They hadn't come to solve anything. They had come to drill a hole in the wall I had built, to drain the resource they had found, and I had just shown them the drill was in my hand, not theirs. They did not storm out. They simply deflated. My mother, her face pale and pinched, looked as if I had physically slapped her. Sadie gathered the untouched copies of the loan agreement, her hands shaking, her expression one of such venomous, profound hatred that it was, in its own way, more honest than her tears had been. My father was the last one to stand. He looked at me, then at the empty chair where my mother had sat, then back to me. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just shook his head, a gesture of deep, exhausted defeat, and followed them out of the room. The silence in the co-working lounge was immediate and absolute. It was a clean, sterile void. I calmly packed my briefcase, I stacked the water glasses, I put the master copies of Option A, Option B, and Option C back into my folder. The test was complete. The results were conclusive. The counteroffensive began before I had even paid for my parking. It was not a direct assault, it was a guerrilla war. My phone, which had been respectfully silent during the meeting, began to vibrate, a low, angry hum. My mother, having failed to defeat me with logic, had retreated to her most reliable battlefield, public opinion. A new notification from social media. She had posted, no names, of course, she was too skilled for that. It was a new profile picture, a soft focus, old photo of her and my father on a beach. The caption, however, was a tactical strike. You raise your children to be kind. You teach them that family is everything. You hope you've taught them to have a good heart, but sometimes you find out you only taught them how to count their money. A very sad day for those of us who still believe in love. The comments flooded in, a chorus of her loyal, uninformed army. Thinking of you. You've done so much for your girls. I'm so sorry. Mom's name. The younger generation can be so selfish. A child who turns their back on family is the saddest thing in the world. Then came the second wave, the private messages, the soft attack from the extended family. My Aunt Carol. Tessa, honey, I don't know what happened in Austin, but your mother is absolutely heartbroken. Sadie is in real trouble. You're doing so well. Couldn't you just find it in your heart to help them, just for the sake of peace? A cousin on my father's side. Tess, you need to call your dad. This stress is not good for his blood pressure. This is a small amount of money to you, but it's the whole world to them. Don't be so hard-hearted. It's just money. They were painting me as the dragon, the cold, ungrateful child, hoarding my treasure in my Austin castle while the good, simple, loving family starved at the gates. They were trying to shame me into capitulating. The old Tessa would have crumbled. She would have called, weeping, apologizing, ready to wire the $39,000 just to make the public humiliation stop. I, instead, went home and made myself a cup of tea. I sat at my laptop. I would not fight them on their emotional public battlefield. I would drag them back onto mine, the land of facts. I drafted a new email. It was not a social media post. It was a private, clinical response, and I sent it only to those who had messaged me, Aunt Carol, my father's cousin, and I carbon copied my mother, my father, and Sadie. The subject line was, the financial request. My tone was deliberately, carefully, and almost boringly non-dramatic. Dear family, I began, I have received several concerned messages regarding a private financial matter. To ensure absolute clarity, I am providing a brief, factual summary of the meeting that took place this morning. 1. A request was made for a $39,000 cash gift to cover a personal business debt. 2. As a responsible party, I conducted a review and presented 3 formal, viable solutions. Option A. A polite refusal of financial aid. Option B. A detailed, non-cash restructuring plan I developed, which would solve the debt and rebuild the business sustainably. Option C. A formal, low-interest, 24-month loan for the full amount, secured by standard, legal collateral, Sadie's SUV and father's boat, to protect all parties. 3. All 3 solutions were rejected. The only acceptable outcome presented to me was an unconditional, unsecured cash transfer. I am disappointed that this private business negotiation has been turned into a public discussion about my character. My position has not changed. The 3 solutions remain on the table. If anyone has questions about the facts of this matter, please feel free to call me directly. I will not be discussing it further in a public forum. I hit send. It was not an attack. It was a shield. It was a dispassionate, logical firewall. A new text message appeared. June. My stomach tightened. I braced for another assault, another plea from her parents, but the text was just 3 words. Hold on. This is weird. A moment later, my phone lit up with a series of photographs. They were not screenshots. They were photos of old cream-colored paper, brittle with age. The handwriting was a faint, spidery, elegant cursive. June's next text came through. Tessa, I'm at my mom's house, cleaning out the attic. I found a box of old stuff from Bridgeton. I think it's yours. Stuff your mom must have stored here and forgotten. This was inside. I think you were supposed to get this a long time ago. I zoomed in on the first photo. It was an envelope. To my dearest Tessa, it read, to be opened on her high school graduation. I had never seen it before. My high school graduation, the one that had been co-opted and overshadowed by Sadie's new yoga certification. I opened the next photo. It was the letter. My dearest Tessa, I am watching you from my chair today. You are the quiet one, the one who sees everything and does the work. They are loud, and they are takers. It is the way of this family. They see your capable hands, but they see them only as tools. They will take your energy, and your time, and your quiet strength, and they will call it family, when what they really mean is fuel. I am an old woman. I will not be here to see the woman you grow into, but I must give you this advice. The day will come when they will forget you exist. They will forget your birthdays and your triumphs, and then, one day, they will see that you have built something good. They will come to you with an emergency, and their hands will be out, and they will try to make you feel guilty for the very walls you built to protect yourself. Tessa, do not let them. When you are forgotten, do not lower your value. When you are needed, do not set yourself on fire to keep them warm. You are not their kindling. My hand was over my mouth. I could not breathe. This was from my great-grandmother. Written over 10 years ago. She had seen it all. She had seen this very day. June's last text came through. Look at the last picture. I swiped. It was a small, pale blue bank passbook. I zoomed in on the cover, my vision swimming. The Bridgeton Savings and Loan, in account with Elspeth Rhodes, ITF, in trust for Tessa M. Whitlow. The last entry, dated the day before my graduation, was a deposit. The balance was $500. It was not $39,000. It was nothing, and it was everything. It was not a vague promise. It was not an emotional demand. It was a legal document. It was a notarized contract. It was love, with paperwork. I sat on my terracotta sofa, the one that had been appraised and found wanting, and I finally understood the one, simple, binary truth of my life. The people who truly love you leave you proof. They leave you a $500 passbook in a sealed envelope. They leave you a will. They leave you a clear title. The people who need you leave you bills. They leave you invoices. They leave you with the $39,000 wreckage of their own bad decisions and the chocolate cake you never, ever liked. I did not realize I was crying, a deep, silent, racking sob, until the sofa dipped beside me. Jonah. He must have used his key. He did not speak. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not offer a solution or a risk mitigation strategy. He just saw the phone in my hand and the tears, and he put his arm around me. He pulled me against his side, a solid, warm wall. He said nothing. He just sat there, in the quiet of my apartment, and held me. He was simply, finally, present. My phone buzzed against my leg. I pulled away from Jonah, my face stiff and wet, and looked at the screen. 2 new messages had come in while I was crying. The first was from my mother. The email had clearly found its mark. Tessa, this is absurd. All this paperwork and these options. You are making this far too difficult. This is simple. You have the money. We need it. Stop being dramatic and just give it to us. You are embarrassing yourself. I read the words, embarrassing myself. By demanding accountability, I marked the message as read and did not reply. The second message was from Sadie. It was not a plea. It was not an apology. It was a single, blurry photograph of a handwritten list on notebook paper. Back rent, $24,000. Lease penalty, $10,000. Inventory loss, east, $5,000. Total, 39,000. Beneath the list, she had scrawled a single line. This is the bill. I'm not giving you my car. Send the money. She had not accepted a solution. She had not accepted a negotiation. She had reissued her invoice. I stared at the numbers, and I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even frustration. I felt the cold, quiet click of a deadbolt sliding into place in my mind. As if summoned by a different universe, my work phone, charging on the kitchen counter, began to ring. The sound was clean, professional. I stood up and answered it. Tessa Whitlow. Tessa. Maria. Am I catching you at a bad time? It was my boss. No, Maria, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Not at all. Good. Your failure mode analysis on the Kinetic R project was, and I quote the board, exceptional. We're greenlighting the next phase. We want you to lead the new project team. Full test and validation initiative. It's a significant amount of responsibility, and the deadline is tight. Can you handle it? The old Tessa would have hesitated. She would have said, My family is in town. There's a crisis. I'm not sure if this is the right time. She would have been torn, trying to be useful in two places at once, and failing at both. I looked at the whiteboard, still standing in my living room, with its map of silence and demand. I looked at the untouched chocolate cake on my counter. I looked at Sadie's itemized invoice on my phone screen. My family did not need me. They needed a function, an ATM. My job did not need a function. It needed me, my brain, my skills, my leadership. Yes, Maria, I said. My voice was clear. I can handle it. I would be honored. Send me the project charter. I hung up the phone. I walked back to the sofa. Jonah looked up at me, a question in his eyes. That was work, I said. I'm leading the new Kinetic project. He broke into a slow, genuine smile. Tess, that's incredible. I sat down, and for the first time, the silence in my Austin condo was not empty. It was not the silence of waiting. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of a house with good, solid foundations. It was the silence of work to be done. It was the silence of a choice, finally made. And for the first time in my entire life, it was a silence that was completely and totally free of guilt. I let a full day pass, a day of silence. I worked on the preliminary charter for the Kinetic project. I took Maple for a long walk. I went to dinner with Jonah. I did not check for their response. I let them sit in the hotel room I was paying for. I had seen the credit card charge on my account, and stew in the acidic silence of their failure. Then, on the second day, I sent the text. Dinner, 7 p.m., a small Italian place called Lucia's. Be there. This is the last time we will be discussing the $39,000. I chose it specifically. It was small, dimly lit, and expensive. It was a place where conversations were, by necessity, quiet. The tables were close together, the acoustics heavy with the polite, civilized murmur of people enjoying wine and good food. It was a place where yelling was impossible. It was a perfect, pressurized chamber for a final negotiation. I arrived first, of course. I took a small table for 4 in the corner. The light from the candle on the table was a warm, golden yellow, catching the grain of the dark wood. I ordered a glass of water. They arrived at 7:10. Late. A final, petty power play. They looked exhausted. The righteous fury of the co-working space had burned off, leaving a dull, gray ash of resentment. My mother's eyes were shadowed. Sadie looked like she had been crying for 48 hours, but not from sadness, from pure, unadulterated rage. My father just looked old. His shoulders slumped. They sat. The waiter approached. Can I get you something to drink? Just water for us, my mother said, her voice a dry rasp. I waited until the waiter had filled their glasses and disappeared. Well, my mother began, trying to seize the narrative. This is a nice place, Tessa. Very fancy. You certainly do like your fancy things. I did not take the bait. I reached into my briefcase, which was on the floor beside me. I pulled out the 3 manila envelopes. They were slightly curled from the humidity. I placed them on the table, fanned out, precisely in the center, next to the small candle. A, B, C. "We are not here to discuss my fancy things, Mom," I said. My voice was low, but it cut through the restaurant's murmur. "We are here to finish this. These are the same 3 options from our meeting. They have not changed." My mother's hand, thin and adorned with rings, reached out. It hovered, as if she were deciding which piece in a shell game held the P. She did not touch option B. She did not touch option A. She slid option C, the thick one, the one that held the promise of money, toward herself. She pulled the 5-page document out. Sadie leaned in, her eyes scanning the pages with a desperate, lawyer-like intensity. My mother read, her lips moving silently. Then she stopped. Her eyes narrowed. She had reached page 4, the collateral. "This is an insult," she whispered, her voice shaking. She slid the document over to my father. "Look at this. Look at what she's demanding." My father put on the reading glasses he had to buy from a drugstore. He read the clause. His face, already gray, turned a dull, angry brick red. "You're serious about this," he said. It was not a question. "The boat." "I am serious about that document," I replied. "It is a standard, secured loan. It protects the lender." "This is heavy-handed, Tessa," he said, pushing the papers away as if they were contaminated. This is cruel. To hold a man's boat over his head. That's not right." The sound of a fork hitting a plate at the next table was loud in the sudden quiet. I leaned forward, the candlelight catching my eyes. "Cruel?" I asked, my voice still a whisper. "Is it crueler than asking me to sell my home? Is it heavier than a $39,000 debt with no plan to repay? I think this document is much lighter than a divorce. Dad, it's much lighter than Sadie's husband leaving her because of the financial ruin. It's lighter than the chain reaction of liens and lawsuits that will happen when she defaults on this and then her mortgage. This," I said, tapping the paper, "is just accountability. It is the lightest thing on this table." My father had no response. He just shook his head, looking down into his water glass. Sadie, seeing that the unconditional money faucet was not just dry but was actively guarded by legal teeth, let out a sound of pure disgust. She pointed a trembling finger at the second envelope. "Option B." "And this," she sneered, her voice cracking with contempt. "This restructuring plan. I'm not doing it. I am not having a garage sale." "It's not a garage sale. Sadie," I said. "It's a liquidation." "It's humiliating," she hissed. My brand is about a luxury experience, a boutique, not some cheap online pop-up. It's not on brand." I stared at her. The candle flame was reflected in her dark, furious eyes. "Your brand is bankrupt." I thought, "Your brand is a personal judgment for $39,000. Your brand is a failure." I did not say that. "The brand, as you call it, is what has a judgment against it," I said, quietly. "This plan gives you a new one, a solvent one. It costs you nothing but your pride, and it actually works." "I won't do it," she said. She crossed her arms, a furious, petulant child. "I won't." There was a long, terrible silence, the sound of happy, normal people laughing at another table. My mother looked at her daughter. She looked at her husband. She looked at the 3 envelopes. She had lost. She had lost on the assault. She had lost on the logic. She had lost on the negotiation. She had one weapon left, the one she had saved since my childhood, the final, desperate, nuclear option. She took a sip of water. Her hand was perfectly steady. She set the glass down. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a cold, clear, manufactured pity. "You're so practical, Tessa," she said, her voice a marvel of condescending sorrow. "I don't know who taught you to be like this. All this this paper, all these options and solutions. This isn't what family is. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a final, devastating whisper. You're going to get everything you want. You'll have your big, important job, and your perfect condo, and all your things, and you will be completely and utterly alone. The words hit the air. This was the checkmate. This was the threat that had kept me in line for 28 years. The fear of being the unloved, unwanted, lonely spinster, the practical, cold one that no one could ever love. I let her words hang in the air for a long moment. I watched the candle flicker. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I set the glass down. I looked my mother in the eye. Lonely? I asked. My voice was so quiet. They all had to lean in to hear me. Mom, I was lonely for my entire life in Bridgeton. I was lonely on my 21st birthday, which you postponed, because Sadie was sad about a boy. I was lonely at my graduation party, which I had to share with a yoga certification. I was lonely at that dining room table, sitting next to all of you, while you ignored my promotion to watch a live stream of cheap jewelry. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt no fear, only a deep, profound, ancient pity. I was more lonely in that house, surrounded by people who only saw me as a pair of hands, than I have ever been in my entire life in Austin. I am not afraid of being alone. I am afraid of being used, and that is over. I slid the 3 envelopes back to the center of the table. They sat there, white and stark. This is the end of the negotiation, I said. I am starting a new project at Halcyon on Monday. This file needs to be closed. You have 48 hours. I looked at my watch. It is 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. You have until Sunday at noon. You can choose option B, I said, tapping the envelope. The solution. You can sign the first page and I will help you execute the plan. You can choose option C. I tapped the next one. The loan, you, Sadie, and you, Dad, can sign and notarize that document. When I receive it, I will wire the money. I paused. If I have not received a signed agreement for option B or option C by Sunday at noon, then I will be choosing for you, and we will be proceeding, permanently, with option A, the refusal. I met each of their gazes, and from that moment forward, the number 39,000 will never be spoken between us again. Are we clear? Sadie was openly weeping now, tears of pure, thwarted rage. My father was rubbing his face, a man hollowed out. My mother was just staring at me, her face a blank mask of disbelief. She genuinely could not comprehend that her final weapon had failed. The waiter, sensing the tension, bustled over. Are we ready to order, or... No, I said, signaling for my briefcase. We're finished here. Just the check for the waters, please. I paid the bill in cash, leaving a generous tip. I stood up. They remained seated, stunned, as if I had just pulled the pin on a grenade and left it on the table. I did not hug them. I did not say, safe flight home. I did not say, I love you. I just turned, my briefcase in hand, and walked out of the restaurant. I pushed through the heavy wooden door and stepped out onto the street. The air was cool and damp. A light rain had begun to fall. It was not a storm. It was a thin, fine, consistent Austin drizzle. It was straight and decisive, each drop separate from the next, drawing clean. Parallel lines on the pavement. It was the sound of a choice, finally made. That night, I went home. I checked my work email. I made a few notes for my meeting on Monday. At 10 p.m., I got into bed. I turned off the light, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I did not dream. I did not dream of the old kitchen in Bridgeton. I did not dream of the endless, greasy pile of dishes in the sink, the water rising, the sound of their voices laughing in the next room. I did not dream of running, of being invisible, of shouting and not being heard. I just slept. It was a deep, dark, uncomplicated, and perfectly empty sleep. The 48-hour deadline was a box, a quiet, defined, and finite space in time. I spent it working. I was building the project charter for the Kinetic Initiative, my mind humming with the clean, satisfying logic of data flows and risk mitigation. I did not check my phone. I did not pace. I did not wait. I had set the protocol, and all I had to do was let it execute. Friday passed. Saturday passed. I took Maple to the park. I had dinner with Jonah. My life in Austin, the one I had constructed with my own hands, continued, uninterrupted. Sunday, I sat at my desk with my morning coffee. The deadline was noon. At 11:58 a.m., my phone lit up on the desk beside me. A text message. From my mother. I picked it up. My hand was perfectly steady. I read the words. It was the final, predictable, desperate spasm of a failed strategy. We are not signing anything. That is ridiculous. We are your family. We are in crisis, and you are our only hope. This is your responsibility. Send the money today. I looked at the message. The words that used to be my triggers. Ridiculous. Family. Crisis. Responsibility. They had no power anymore. They were just... they were the error codes from a defunct system. I typed my reply. It was shorter than hers. As you have declined to select option B or option C, we are now, as agreed, proceeding with option A. The file is closed. I wish you the best of luck in finding a solution. I hit send. The response was not a text. It was an explosion. A long, rambling, furious block of text poured in, the words tripping over themselves in their haste. I was cold. I was a monster. I was ungrateful. I had forgotten where I came from. I was selfish. I was abandoning them. I had shamed them. My great-grandmother would be disgusted by me. I was not a daughter. I was nothing. I read the words. I felt nothing. A faint, distant echo of an old sting, but it was miles away. It could not touch me. I did not reply. My phone immediately rang. Dad? I looked at the screen as it vibrated on the desk. I watched it ring. Once, twice. I declined the call. A new text. Sadie. It was not words. It was just a string of curses. I did not reply. I muted my mother's contact. I muted my father's. I muted Sadie's. I muted the entire extended family group chat. The storm was raging. The digital waves of blame and guilt were crashing, but they were crashing against a wall 1,000 miles away, a wall I had built, and on my side of the wall, the lake was perfectly, beautifully calm. I turned from my phone and walked to my desk. I opened the bottom drawer. I took out the small, pale blue bank passbook. My great-grandmother's letter was still tucked inside. When you are forgotten, do not lower your value. $500. It was love, with paperwork. I sat at my laptop. I logged into my bank account. I opened a new tab. I searched for the Austin Community College. I found the link for donations and legacy gifts. I set up a new, recurring scholarship fund. I named it the Elspeth Rhodes Women in STEM Scholarship. It was not large. It would be enough to cover the cost of books for one female student each semester. I made the first donation. I took the love that they had abandoned in an attic, the love they had dismissed as worthless, and I turned it into a legacy. I had taken the fuel they wanted to burn, and I turned it into a foundation for someone else. Life moved on. A month later, I was in the main boardroom at Halcyon. I was presenting my initial findings on the Kinetic project. My team had discovered that the haptic feedback system we were designing for rehabilitation also had a massive application in athletic performance. We could, I explained, not only help someone walk again, but we could also help a runner optimize their stride in real time. The board was not just impressed, they were ecstatic. My project was fast-tracked. My budget was doubled. Maria, my boss, announced that my initial proposal was being turned into an internal case study for the entire company. She asked me to lead a lunch and learn for the junior specialists. The suggested topic was managing high-stakes projects. I retitled it. My presentation was called Clarity and Boundaries: How to Define the Protocol and Stick to It. I stood in front of a room of 30 people, mostly young women, their faces eager, all of them still trying to be useful. I talked for an hour. I talked about data. I talked about mitigating risk. I talked about the absolute professional necessity of saying no. I explained that a no is not a rejection. It is not an emotional failure. It is a strategic decision to protect the integrity of the project and ensure its ultimate success. Not once did I mention my family. Not once did I mention Sadie, or a boat, or a condo. I did not have to. The young woman in the front row, the one who I knew stayed late every night, the one who was drowning in other people's work. She understood. She understood exactly what I was saying. The silence from Minnesota was absolute. It lasted for 6 months. The angry social media posts eventually stopped. The accusations dried up. I heard, indirectly through June, that Sadie had, as predicted, declared bankruptcy. The judgment was public. Her husband, who I suppose had not signed up for a $39,000 debt, had left her. The bank, not me, had repossessed the SUV. The bank, not me, had seized my father's boat. The chain reaction had happened, exactly as the data had foretold. I was at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon, reviewing sensor data, when my phone rang, an unscheduled call, a number I had muted, but not blocked. Mom! I stared at it. My heart did not pound. My stomach did not drop. This was a new input. My protocol held. Verify. Assess. I answered. Hello? There was a silence on the other end. Then, a voice I had not heard in a very, very long time. It was not the voice of the negotiator. It was not the voice of the emotional architect. It was a voice that was small and tired. Tessa? Hi, Mom. There was a long, shaky breath. I saw the article about your project, the one your company put online. I see. That's wonderful, honey. You're doing so well. I waited. The old Tessa would have gushed, would have filled the silence. Desperate to ease the awkwardness, I just waited. Tessa. Her voice broke. It was not a performance. It was a sound of true, genuine friction. I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. The words landed. Thank you for saying that, I said. My voice was quiet. I miss my daughter, she whispered. I miss you. I don't know how we got here. I don't know if we can. Is there a way we can start over? Here it was, the final, most important negotiation. I would like that, Mom, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. But the terms would have to be new. They would have to be my terms. What terms? She asked, her voice small. I looked out my office window, at the sharp, clear line of the Austin skyline. Condition 1. No money, ever. The bank is closed. It will never, ever be part of our relationship again. My finances are my own. Okay, she said. It was a quick, small sound. Condition 2. My time is respected. No more 5 a.m. airport runs. No more last minute, demanded favors. My time is my own. You may ask, and I will answer with either a yes or a no. Okay, Tessa. And condition 3. I paused. This was the one. The most important one. You can never use me to put out someone else's fire again. I am not your crisis manager. I am not Sadie's fixer. I am not Dad's tech support. I am your daughter. That is the only role I will accept. The silence on the line was profound. I could hear her breathing. This was the moment. She would either accept, or she would retreat to her old anger, and the line would go dead forever. Okay, she finally whispered, a sound like glass setting. That sounds fair. It was not a magic wand. It was not a happy ending. It was a beginning. Our first few phone calls after that were stilted, awkward. We talked about the weather. We talked about her garden, but when she started to complain about my father's blood pressure, I said, Mom, condition 3, and she stopped. When she made a passive-aggressive joke about how nice it must be to afford my condo, I said, Mom, condition 1. And she stopped. It was not a perfect relationship, but for the first time in my life, it was an honest one. And whether it lasted, whether it failed, the outcome no longer defined my happiness. My happiness was my own. That evening, I was standing on my balcony. The Texas sky was a wild, bruised purple and orange. Jonah was beside me, his arm around my shoulders. We were watching the sunset, below us, in the small grassy park. Maple was running in wild, chaotic circles with Orbit. They were a flash of gold and brown, a joyful, silly, chosen family. "You're quiet tonight," Jonah said, kissing the top of my head. "Everything okay?" "My mom called," I said. "Oh," he said, his voice instantly cautious. "The $39,000 alarm bell?" "No," I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. "Just, my mom," he smiled, understanding. "That's good." "It is," I said. I looked at the life I had built, the quiet home, the man I loved, the dog I adored, the job that respected me. None of it had been given to me. All of it had been earned. I had built it, piece by piece, by learning to say no to them, so that I could finally truly say yes to myself. When people only want what is in your wallet, the kindest thing you can do is give them a mirror. Those who truly love you will stay, and they will look back at themselves. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to connect with all of you. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from, and share your own thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this.